What if helping a stranger cost you the only job standing between your family and homelessness? A 6 months pregnant single mom stopped on the highway to help a man fix his flat tire, and it made her 4 minutes late to the interview that could save her family. And because of that single act, the hiring manager humiliated her and threw her resume in the trash in front of a room full of strangers. Stick around, because the man she stopped for was about to walk through those exact doors, and nobody in that lobby was ready for what happened next. This is her story.
Now, hold on a second, my dear, just a quick moment. If you're still here, it truly means a lot to me. But here's something that surprised me. Almost 98% of you watching haven't subscribed yet. 98. It's like enjoying something and never saying a word about it. So here's my small request. Tap the subscribe button. It's completely free, and it just means you won't miss what comes next. And if you've enjoyed this, leave a like as well. It really helps more than you think. Thank you for staying with me. Now let's continue.
My name is Maya, and tonight, everything I have left in this world comes down to 11 minutes. I glance at the dashboard clock again, like staring at it harder will slow it down. 8:49 a.m. My interview is at 9:15. 26 minutes away on a good day, and today is not a good day, because my gas gauge has been sitting on empty since the exit before last, blinking at me like it's daring me to keep going. I press my hand flat against my stomach, feeling the small, insistent kick from underneath my ribs. 6 months. Nobody at this interview can know I'm 6 months pregnant. I've got the blazer buttoned just right, the one I found on clearance 8 months ago before I even knew I'd need to hide a growing belly in it. I practiced in the mirror last night, turning sideways, checking the angle. If I sit up straight and keep my hands folded on the table, I can pass for maybe 4 months. Maybe. It has to be enough to get through one interview. In the rearview mirror, I catch a glimpse of the car seat in the back. Empty now because my son Eli is with Mrs. Denton next door, the only neighbor who still speaks to me since the eviction notice went up. Eli is 2 years old, and he has a heart murmur that the specialist says needs monitoring, medication, maybe a procedure if it doesn't resolve on its own. The bill from his last appointment is sitting on my kitchen counter, unopened, because I already know what it says. I don't need to read a number to know it's more money than I have. The eviction notice is taped to my front door. Not slipped under it, not mailed. Taped, right at eye level, so I'd see it the second I walked up the steps with grocery bags digging into my fingers. 72 hours became 24 hours became this morning, and my landlord made it very clear on the phone yesterday that he is done being patient with a woman who is, in his words, living beyond her means. I want to laugh every time I think about that phrase, living beyond my means. I have exactly one means, and it's whatever's left in my checking account after formula, diapers, prenatal vitamins I've been splitting into half doses to make the bottle last longer, and the electric bill I paid 2 weeks late last month. This job is the only thing standing between my children and losing absolutely everything. Executive Assistant to the Senior VP of Operations at Halloway Industries, a Fortune 500 conglomerate with a building made entirely of glass and steel downtown. The kind of building where the elevators probably cost more than my car. The pay is triple what I made at the call center before they laid off half the floor. Health insurance starting day one. I read that line in the job posting probably 30 times. Health insurance starting day one. I found the listing at 2 in the morning, nursing a glass of water because my stomach was too tight with anxiety to sleep. Scrolling job boards with the kind of desperation that makes you apply to things you have no business applying to. I don't have a fancy resume. I have 3 years as an office manager at a dental practice that closed, 8 months at the call center, and a 2-year gap where I was pregnant with Eli and then raising him alone after his father decided fatherhood wasn't for him after all. But somehow, they called me back. A woman named Patricia from HR. Her voice clipped and professional, telling me I'd made it past the first round and they wanted me to come in for a final interview with the hiring manager himself. I cried after I hung up the phone. Not pretty crying. Ugly, gasping, hand over my mouth crying, right there in my kitchen, because for the first time in months, I let myself believe something good might actually happen to me. That was 4 days ago. Since then, I've rehearsed my answers to every interview question I could find online. I've ironed this blazer twice. I've prayed more in the last 4 days than I have in the last 4 years combined. The car sputters slightly as I take the on-ramp, and my heart lurches into my throat. Not now. I whisper to the dashboard, to the universe, to whoever might be listening. Please, not now. Just get me there. That's all I need. I do the math again in my head, the same math I've been doing all morning. If I get this job, my first paycheck comes in 2 weeks. The landlord wants payment in 24 hours. That gap terrifies me. But Patricia mentioned a hiring bonus during our call, a sign-on incentive for candidates who can start immediately. If I can just get that bonus, even a partial advance, I might be able to buy myself enough time to stop the eviction. I might be able to schedule Eli's procedure. I might be able to breathe for the first time in months. Everything is riding on the next 20 minutes. I merge onto the highway, and the morning sun is doing that thing where it hits the windshield at exactly the wrong angle, making it hard to see the road ahead. I flip the visor down, squint, keep my foot steady on the gas because I can't afford to waste fuel by speeding and then braking, speeding and then braking. I need every fume in this tank to count. My phone buzzes in the cup holder, a text from Mrs. Denton. Eli's fine, eating breakfast. Ask me how proud I am of you right now. I smile despite everything, despite the tightness in my chest, despite the ache low in my back that's been bothering me since yesterday, probably just from being on my feet too much, from carrying too much, both literally and otherwise. I think about the life growing inside me, a girl, though I haven't told anyone that yet, haven't even let myself fully believe it yet because believing in good things has started to feel dangerous. I think about how I'll explain to her someday, when she's old enough to understand, what these months were like. How her mother drove on fumes and prayed at red lights and rehearsed interview answers with one hand on her belly, like she could transfer some of her own desperate hope directly into her daughter's bones. I check the clock again. 8:56 a.m. 19 minutes to get there, find parking, walk in looking calm and composed, instead of like a woman who has been holding her entire life together with tape and prayer. I can do this. I have to do this. There is no version of today where I don't do this. The highway stretches out ahead of me, mostly empty this early, just a few cars scattered across the lanes. I ease into the fast lane, foot steady, breath steady, telling myself over and over that I am going to walk into that building and I am going to get that job and everything is finally going to be okay. That's when I see him. A man on the shoulder of the road, jacket off, sleeves shoved up to his elbows, standing over a car with its hazards blinking and one tire completely flat, sunk down onto the rim. He's got his hands braced on his hips, staring at the tire like it personally betrayed him. And even from here, I can tell his suit costs more than everything I'm wearing combined. I glance at the clock, 8:58 a.m. I glance at him, struggling, alone, no other cars stopping, everyone just speeding past like he's invisible. And for one terrible suspended second, I feel my foot hover between the gas pedal and the brake, feel the entire weight of my future balanced on a decision I have exactly 3 seconds to make. I don't remember deciding. I just remember my hands moving, my blinker clicking on, my car drifting toward the shoulder, before my brain had fully caught up with what my body was already doing. "What are you doing?" I said out loud to myself, my voice cracking in the empty car. "Maya, what are you doing? You don't have time for this." But I was already slowing down, already pulling in behind his car, gravel crunching under my tires, hazards blinking in rhythm with his, like the two cars were talking to each other. I sat there for a second, with my hands still on the wheel, staring at the clock. 8:59 a.m. 16 minutes to get to an interview that was now 22 minutes away. The math didn't work anymore. I already knew that. I did it anyway. I pushed open my door and stepped out onto the shoulder, the wind from a passing truck nearly knocking me sideways, and the man turned around fast, startled, like he hadn't expected anyone to actually stop. "Oh, hey, you don't have to," he started, holding up both hands, grease already smudged across his palms and up one forearm. "I've got it handled. I just called for a tow. You should get back on the road. It's not safe standing out here." "You don't have it handled," I said, walking around to my trunk and popping it open. "You've been standing over that tire for however long doing absolutely nothing to it." He laughed, surprised, like nobody had spoken to him that directly in a while. I mean, in my defense, I was trying to figure out where the jack even goes. "This isn't my car, it's a rental." "Of course it is," I muttered, pulling my own tire iron and jack out from under the flooring of my trunk, the same tools my father taught me to use, back when he was still around, back before everything in my life became a series of things I had to figure out by myself. Move back, I'll show you. You don't need to do this. Really. I can wait for the tow truck. I looked at him then. Really looked at him. Dark hair, sharp jaw, the kind of face that looked like it belonged on a billboard somewhere, but sweating through an expensive shirt with his tie loosened and his composure completely gone. He looked exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the tire. How long is the tow truck going to take? I asked. He checked his phone, wincing. 40 minutes, maybe 50. And you have somewhere to be? Yeah. Actually, yeah, I really do. It's important. He ran a hand through his hair, leaving a streak of grease near his temple. But it's fine. It's not your problem. I knelt down next to the flat tire, my knees protesting, my lower back sending up a small flare of complaint that I ignored, because I ignore most things my body tells me these days. I positioned the jack under the frame the way my father showed me 20 years ago, and I started cranking it. Okay, seriously, he said, crouching down next to me, concern flooding his face. You really don't have to do this. I can see you're... He stopped himself. Pregnant, I said flatly, not looking up. Yes, I'm aware. I wasn't going to say it like that. It's fine. I'm 6 months. I'm not made of glass. I glanced at the clock on my phone, sitting on the pavement beside me. 9:02 a.m., 13 minutes. I felt my stomach twist, and it wasn't the baby this time. Can you hand me the lug wrench? It's the black bag. He scrambled to grab it, and for a second neither of us said anything. Just the sound of the jack cranking and the highway wind rushing past every time a car flew by too fast, too close, throwing grit against my face. I'm Daniel, he said finally, holding the wrench out to me. Maya, I said, taking it from him and getting to work on the lug nuts, which were, of course, cranked down tight by some machine at the factory, with more torque than my pregnant arms currently had. Maya, I really appreciate this. I mean it. You can thank me by holding this steady, I said, nodding at the jack, and not talking too much. I need to focus. He obeyed, kneeling there beside me, watching my hands work with an expression I couldn't quite read. Something between confusion and awe, like he genuinely could not understand why a very pregnant stranger was on her knees on the side of a highway fixing his rental car. The truth was, I couldn't fully explain it to myself either. I had exactly 13 minutes to make a 22-minute drive, and every second I spent here was a second I would never get back. But there was something about the way he'd looked when I pulled up, that particular flavor of helpless that I recognized because I live inside it every single day. Nobody stops for people like that. Nobody stopped for me, not once, in the entire year since Eli's father left. I knew exactly what it felt like to stand on the side of a road, metaphorical or otherwise, and watch the world drive past you like you don't exist. I wasn't going to be one more car that didn't stop. There, I grunted, breaking the last lug nut free. Help me pull the tire off. It's heavier than it looks. We wrestled the flat off together. My hands slick with grease now too. My blazer sleeve smeared with a long black streak I didn't even want to look at yet. He grabbed the spare from his trunk, and I guided him through mounting it, tightening the nuts in the star pattern my father drilled into me before I was even old enough to drive. You've done this before, he said. A lot of times. Story of my life, actually. Fixing things nobody else will. Sounds exhausting. It is. I stood up, one hand pressed into my lower back, the other resting briefly against my belly as the baby shifted at the sudden movement. Okay, lower the jack slow, and then we're done. He did, and the car settled onto the new tire with a soft groan of relief that I felt somewhere in my own chest too. For a second, we just stood there on the shoulder, both of us covered in grease, both of us breathing a little hard, and he looked at me with an intensity that caught me off guard. I don't know how to thank you for this, he said. I mean that. You didn't have to stop. Nobody else did. I know, I said quietly. That's exactly why I did. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something else, maybe ask my last name, maybe ask where I was headed in such a hurry, but I was already moving, already grabbing my tools off the pavement and shoving them back into my trunk with hands that were shaking now, not from the effort, but from the clock ticking down in my head, like a countdown to my own execution. 9:11 a.m. I have to go, I said, slamming my trunk shut. I'm sorry, I really have to go. Wait, he called after me. But I was already sliding into my driver's seat, already turning the key, already pulling back onto the highway with grease on my hands and grease on my blazer, and a gray sky starting to spit rain against my windshield, like the day itself had decided to pile on. In the rearview mirror, I watched him standing there on the shoulder, hand raised in a kind of confused wave, growing smaller and smaller, until the highway curved and he disappeared completely. I didn't know what he did for a living, or where he'd been rushing to, or why some part of me kept glancing at the rearview mirror like I might see him again. All I knew was that it was 9:14 a.m. My interview started in 1 minute. I was still 11 minutes away, and I had just ruined the only blazer I owned to help a stranger I would probably never see again in my life. I gripped the steering wheel and pressed my foot down harder on the gas, tears already burning behind my eyes, praying with everything I had left that somehow, some way, this wasn't the mistake it felt like it was. By the time I pulled into the parking garage at Halloway Industries, the sky had opened up completely, sheets of rain hammering down so hard I could barely see the entrance to the visitor spots. I didn't have an umbrella. Of course I didn't have an umbrella. I ran from my car to the front doors with my portfolio held over my head like that was going to do anything at all, and by the time I pushed through the revolving glass door into the lobby, I was soaked through to my skin. I stood there for a second, dripping onto the polished marble floor, and caught my reflection in the mirrored wall beside the security desk. My hair was plastered flat against my forehead. My blazer, my only blazer, had a long black grease stain streaked across the left sleeve and another smaller one near the hem, where I must have brushed against the tire without realizing it. My blouse underneath was soaked enough to be nearly see-through, clinging to the curve of my stomach in a way that made it obvious, painfully, unmistakably obvious, that I was pregnant. There was no hiding it now. No sitting at the right angle, no folded hands, no careful blazer buttoning. I looked exactly like what I was, a woman who had been through something on her way here. 9:19 a.m., 4 minutes late. I told myself 4 minutes wasn't the end of the world. I told myself I could explain, that any reasonable person would understand, that this was still salvageable if I just kept my composure and walked in there with my head held high. Maya Bennett, I'm here for a 9:15 interview with the hiring manager, I said to the woman at the front desk, forcing my voice to stay steady even though my teeth wanted to chatter from the rain-soaked chill sinking into my bones. She looked me up and down, her expression flickering with something I chose not to name, and picked up her phone. I'll let him know you're here. I found a chair near the elevator bank and sat down, trying to wring some of the water out of my sleeve without making a scene, trying to pat my hair into something resembling professional. My hands were still faintly smudged with grease no matter how hard I'd scrubbed them at a gas station sink 2 exits back. Precious minutes I couldn't spare but desperately needed. A man came down eventually, tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, his expression already arranged into something cold before he even reached me. "Ms. Bennett?" he said, and the way he said my name made it sound like an accusation. "Yes, hi, I'm so sorry I'm a few minutes late. You're aware this interview was scheduled for 9:15. I am, yes, and I apologize. There was an emergency on the highway, a man was stranded, and I stopped to help him change his tire. And I know that sounds. You stopped," he repeated slowly, like he was tasting the words and finding them distasteful. "On your way to a job interview, to help a stranger with a flat tire. Yes." I straightened my spine, tried to hold on to some shred of dignity, even as water dripped from the ends of my hair onto the marble floor. I couldn't just drive past him. He looked me over then, a long, deliberate, humiliating sweep from my soaked hair down to my ruined shoes, lingering on my stomach in a way that made my skin crawl. "How far along are you?" he asked, and it wasn't a kind question. It was a weapon dressed up as small talk. 6 months, I said, and I heard how small my voice had gotten, hated myself a little for it. "And you didn't think that was relevant information to disclose before coming in for an executive assistant position that requires long hours, travel, and total availability?" "I'm fully capable of, Ms. Bennett." He held up a hand, cutting me off entirely, and glanced around the lobby like he was making sure other people were watching this, like my humiliation was a performance he wanted witnesses for. "Let me be direct with you, because I think you need to hear it plainly. This position requires professionalism. It requires someone who can be relied upon to show up on time, dressed appropriately, prepared. What I am looking at right now is a woman who arrived 4 minutes late, soaking wet, stained with what I can only assume is motor oil, and visibly pregnant with, from the sound of it, absolutely no plan for how she intends to manage a demanding executive role while raising an infant. "I have a plan," I said, my voice shaking now, not from fear, but from a rage so hot it nearly overtook the humiliation. "I have childcare arranged. I don't need your personal logistics," he said. "I need to know you understand. This role is not a charity placement. We don't hire people out of sympathy for their circumstances." Tears burned behind my eyes, and I hated them. Hated my body for betraying me in this moment of all moments. Hated that I couldn't stop my chin from trembling. "I am not asking for sympathy," I said. "I am asking for a chance to explain that I was late because I stopped to help a stranger who had nobody else stopping for him. I would think a company like this would want to hire someone with that kind of character." Something flickered across his face, and for one brief second I thought maybe I'd reached him. Then his mouth curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Character doesn't answer phones on time," he said. He reached out and plucked my resume from the folder tucked under my arm before I could stop him, glanced at it for exactly 2 seconds, and then, in front of the security guard, the front desk woman, and 3 other people waiting near the elevators, he tore it cleanly down the middle. The sound of it, that dry, ripping sound, seemed to echo through the entire lobby. "I'm going to save us both some time," he said, dropping the 2 halves into the trash can beside the desk. "This isn't going to work out. I'd suggest you focus your energy on finding a position more suited to your current situation." I stood there frozen, staring at the torn pieces of paper sitting in the trash. The resume I had rewritten 7 times. The resume that represented every ounce of hope I'd had left. My whole body was shaking, and I could feel the baby shifting inside me, like even she understood something terrible was happening. "You didn't even let me finish," I whispered. "There's nothing left to finish, Ms. Bennett." He straightened his jacket and turned to walk back toward the elevators. "Security will show you out." I don't remember deciding to cry. I just remember the tears finally spilling over, hot against my cold, rain-soaked face, and the awful, echoing silence of the lobby, as everyone pretended very hard not to be staring at me. I pressed my hand against my stomach, an old habit, a way of comforting both of us at once, and turned toward the revolving doors, my ruined resume sitting in a trash can behind me, my last chance gone, the eviction notice still taped to my door, Eli's medical bills still unopened on my counter, and absolutely nothing left standing between my family and losing everything. I walked toward the exit with my head down, trying to hold on to whatever dignity I had left, when I heard the screech of tires outside and a line of black cars pulling up right against the curb. I froze halfway to the door, my hand still pressed against my stomach, watching through the rain-streaked glass as 3 black SUVs pulled up in a tight, practiced formation right outside the entrance. Nobody parks like that unless somebody important is inside. Doors opened almost in unison, and men in dark suits stepped out first, fast, purposeful, scanning the entrance like they were clearing a path. I should have kept walking. I should have pushed through those revolving doors and gotten as far away from this building and this humiliation as my legs could carry me. But something rooted me in place. Some instinct I couldn't name, and I watched as the glass doors swung open and the lobby air shifted, everyone straightening, everyone suddenly very aware of their posture. And then I saw him. Daniel walked through the doors like he owned them, because, I would learn in the next 60 seconds, he did. His suit jacket was back on now, buttoned, composed, no trace of the grease-streaked, sweating stranger who'd been on his knees beside me on the highway shoulder just an hour ago, except his hands. I noticed his hands first, the same faint gray smudge still along one knuckle that even the executives flanking him hadn't managed to get him to wipe clean before whatever this was. "Mr. Holloway, we weren't expecting you until," someone started, practically jogging to keep pace with him. Holloway. The name hit me like a physical blow. Holloway Industries. This was his family's company. This was his company. I felt the floor tilt slightly beneath me, and I reached out to steady myself against the wall, grease-stained sleeve and all, my mind racing backward through every second of our conversation on the highway. He never told me his last name. I never asked. I was too busy timing my own countdown to disaster to think about who he actually was. He was scanning the lobby as he walked, that same restless, searching energy from the highway, and then his eyes landed on me. Everything about him changed in an instant. "Maya," he said, and the entire lobby seemed to hold its breath at the sound of him saying my name, like he knew me, like I mattered. In a room where 30 seconds ago I had been treated like something to be swept out the door. He broke away from the cluster of executives around him so fast that two of them nearly collided trying to follow, and he crossed the lobby in long strides, stopping directly in front of me, close enough that I could see the concern etched plainly across his face. "What are you doing here?" he asked, and then his eyes dropped, taking in the state of me, soaked hair, ruined blazer, red-rimmed eyes, and something in his expression hardened. "What happened to you?" My voice caught in my throat. I didn't even know where to start. I had an interview. Here. This was the job I was late to. Because of the tire. I watched the realization land on his face in real time. Watched his jaw tighten. Watched his gaze sweep past me toward the front desk. Toward the hiring manager who was standing frozen near the elevator bank with an expression like he'd just watched his own execution being scheduled. "You were late," Daniel said slowly, "because you stopped to help me." "Mr. Holloway, sir, if I may," the hiring manager started, stepping forward, his voice pitched into a register of forced pleasantness that hadn't been anywhere near his tone with me minutes earlier. Daniel didn't even look at him. His eyes stayed locked on mine. "This was your interview. For the executive assistant position." "Was," I said, my voice breaking on the single word. "It's not anymore." "What do you mean it's not anymore?" I felt the tears rising again and hated them. Hated that I couldn't stop them. Hated that after everything, after holding myself together through the flat tire and the rain and the humiliation, I was going to fall apart right here in front of him. I didn't answer. I just turned my head slightly toward the trash can by the front desk, where the two torn halves of my resume were still sitting on top of the garbage, my name visible on one jagged piece, my carefully rewritten qualifications visible on the other. Daniel followed my gaze. I watched him see it. I watched something shift behind his eyes, cold and immediate, like a switch being thrown. He walked to the trash can himself, reached in without a flicker of hesitation, and pulled out both halves of my resume, holding them together like he was trying to physically repair what had been done. His jaw was tight, a muscle ticking at the side of his face. "Who did this?" he said, and it wasn't a question. His voice had dropped into something quiet and controlled that was somehow more frightening than shouting would have been. Nobody answered. The lobby had gone completely, eerily silent. Every executive, every security guard, every person waiting for an elevator, frozen in place, watching. "I asked a question," Daniel said, turning slowly, the torn resume still in his hands. "Who tore this woman's resume in half and threw it in the trash?" The hiring manager's composure finally cracked. "Mr. Holloway, I can explain. She arrived 4 minutes late. Unprofessional appearance. And given her condition, I made a judgment call that—" "Her condition," Daniel repeated, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "You mean the fact that she's pregnant?" "Among other factors, yes, sir, I felt that." "Do you know why she was late?" Daniel's voice was rising now, not into a shout, but into something sharp and cutting that carried across the entire lobby. "She was late because an hour ago, on the side of the highway, in the rain, 6 months pregnant, she pulled over to help a complete stranger change a blown tire. She used her own tools. She ruined her own clothes. She gave up her own time she clearly could not afford to lose, to help someone who had absolutely nothing to offer her in return." He turned the torn resume around so the hiring manager could see it clearly. That stranger was me. The silence that followed was the loudest silence I have ever experienced in my life. I didn't know, sir. There's no way I could have known that when I—" "That's exactly the problem," Daniel said. "You didn't need to know who I was, to treat her like a human being. You looked at a pregnant woman who showed up soaked and a few minutes late, and instead of asking her a single question about why, you humiliated her in front of a room full of strangers and threw her qualifications in the garbage like they meant nothing. I stood there, frozen, watching this unfold like it was happening to someone else, some other version of me in some other lobby, because nothing about this moment felt real. An hour ago I had been on my knees on the highway shoulder with grease under my fingernails, certain I was watching my last chance disappear. Now the man I'd helped was standing in the middle of his own company's lobby, holding the torn pieces of my hope in his hands, and every single person in that building was watching him defend me like it was the easiest decision he had ever made. "Security," Daniel said, not raising his voice, not needing to. "Please escort Mr. Whitfield to collect his personal belongings. His badge is deactivated as of right now." The hiring manager's face went through about 4 different colors before he finally found his voice again. "Sir, please, I have a family. I've been with this company for 11 years. If you'll just let me explain my reasoning." "You had a chance to explain your reasoning," Daniel said. "You did explain it. You told me exactly what your reasoning was. That's the problem." 2 security guards flanked Whitfield, not roughly, but firmly, and he looked around the lobby one last time like he expected someone to intervene on his behalf. Nobody did. Nobody even met his eyes. I almost felt something like pity for him in that moment, watching him get walked toward the elevator by the same security team he'd probably ordered to escort me out 5 minutes earlier. But the pity didn't last long. I thought about the way he'd looked at my stomach like it was a defect. I thought about the sound my resume made when he tore it. The pity evaporated fast. Once he was gone, Daniel turned back to me, and the hardness that had settled over his face during the confrontation softened almost instantly, replaced by something gentler, something that made my chest ache in a completely different way. "I am so sorry," he said. "You have no idea how sorry I am that this happened to you. In my own building. Because of me, in a way." "It wasn't because of you," I said quietly, wiping at my face with the back of my sleeve, not caring anymore how unprofessional it looked. "It was because of him. It was because you stopped to help me instead of protecting your own interview." He looked down at the 2 halves of my resume still in his hands, and something in his expression tightened again, like the sight of it kept reopening the same wound. "Maya, can we sit down somewhere? I want to hear all of it. Everything that led up to this morning. I want to understand exactly what you gave up to help me on that highway." I hesitated. Some old, tired part of me wanted to just leave, to protect whatever scraps of dignity I had left rather than sit across from a stranger, a billionaire's son no less, and lay my entire desperate life out on a table for him to examine. But another part of me, the part that hadn't eaten a full meal in 2 days because I was saving the grocery money for Eli, the part that had a landlord's 24-hour countdown ticking somewhere in the back of my mind even now, needed him to understand. Needed someone, anyone, to finally understand. He led me to a small conference room just off the lobby, glass-walled, quiet, and pulled out a chair for me before sitting down across the table himself. A young woman appeared almost instantly with a towel and a cup of tea, setting them down in front of me without a word before disappearing again. "Thank you," I murmured, wrapping my shaking hands around the warm cup. "Talk to me," Daniel said, "please." So I did. I told him about Eli, about the heart murmur the specialist was monitoring, about the medical bills stacking up faster than I could pay them down. I told him about the eviction notice taped to my door, the 24-hour countdown that had already started before I even walked into this building. I told him I was 6 months pregnant with a daughter I hadn't told anyone about yet, not even Mrs. Denton, because saying it out loud made the fear of not being able to provide for her feel too real. "This interview," I said, my voice cracking, "this job, it was everything. It was the only thing standing between my kids and losing our home. And I saw you stranded on that highway, and I knew exactly what it looked like to be stuck somewhere, with nobody stopping to help. I couldn't be one more person who drove past." Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made me want to look away and made me unable to. "Do you know how many cars passed me before you stopped?" he asked. I shook my head. 11. I counted. 11 cars drove past a man in a suit clearly struggling on the side of a highway, and not one of them even slowed down. You were the 12th car, and you were the only one who stopped, and you were the one person out of all of them who had the least time to spare. He shook his head slowly. I keep trying to imagine what kind of person does that. Gives up something that important for a total stranger. And now I'm sitting here learning that you did it while facing eviction, while your son needs medical care, while carrying a child of your own. Maya, I don't know how to properly thank you for that. You already fired the man who tore up my resume, I said, a small, exhausted laugh escaping me despite everything. I'd say that's a start. That's not nearly enough, he said, leaning forward, his hands folded on the table. That man is gone because what he did was cruel and unprofessional. Full stop, regardless of who you turned out to help on the highway. But what happens to you now? That has nothing to do with punishing him. That's about making this right. You don't owe me anything, Daniel. I didn't stop to help you because I wanted something in return. I know that, he said. That's exactly why you deserve something in return. He reached across the table and gently took the torn pieces of my resume, smoothing them out flat against the surface, like he was trying to piece my whole life back together with his hands. I read this while Whitfield was being escorted out, he said. 3 years managing an entire dental practice, patient records, scheduling, billing, staff coordination. 8 months at a call center handling escalations that most people would have quit within a week. You raised a toddler through a health scare essentially on your own. Maya, this is not a weak resume. This is the resume of someone who has been running an operation, just not one with a corporate title attached to it. I felt my throat tighten, tears threatening again, but different this time. Not the humiliated, defeated tears from the lobby. There is an executive assistant position open, Daniel continued. The one you interviewed for. But I don't think that's actually the right fit for you. And I don't say that to diminish what you came here for today. I say it because I think you're capable of far more than answering my phone calls and managing my calendar. I don't understand. I want to bring you on as an operations coordinator, reporting directly to me. Full executive compensation package. Health insurance effective immediately, and I mean immediately, today, this afternoon if we can get the paperwork moving fast enough. Because from what you've told me, your son needs to see a specialist as soon as possible, and you need to be seeing an OB regularly too. I stared at him, certain I had misheard something, certain the exhaustion and the rain and the stress of the morning were making me hallucinate this entire conversation. That's not, Daniel, that's not a normal job offer. People don't get hired like this. You're right, he said. They don't. Because most people don't stop on a highway to help a stranger while risking everything they have left. I'm not offering you this job out of pity, Maya. I watched you problem solve a flat tire on a rental car in the rain, faster than my own driver could have. I've now heard exactly what you've been managing on your own for months, maybe years, without breaking. That's the exact kind of person I want managing operations for me. What about the eviction? I whispered, almost afraid to ask. Afraid that acknowledging it out loud would somehow make it collapse. It's due tonight. Daniel's expression didn't waver. I'll have someone from our legal team contact your landlord within the hour. We'll cover what's owed and get the eviction notice rescinded today. And Eli's medical bills. Send them to me, all of them, and we'll get them handled through the company's insurance retroactively where possible. I pressed both hands over my mouth, unable to hold back the sob that finally broke loose. Months of exhaustion and fear pouring out of me all at once, in a conference room, with rain still streaking down the glass walls outside. Why? I managed to ask through the tears. Why would you do all of this for someone you met an hour ago? Daniel reached across the table, not quite touching my hand, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of the gesture even without contact. Because an hour ago, he said quietly, you taught me something about who actually deserves to be trusted with responsibility. I'd be a fool not to act on it. Everything happened faster than I could have imagined possible. By that afternoon, I had a signed offer letter in my hands, health insurance active before I even left the building, and a phone call from Holloway Industries' legal team confirming my landlord had not only rescinded the eviction notice, but received enough to clear my balance 3 months forward. I sat in my car in that parking garage afterward and cried harder than I had in the lobby, harder than I had on the highway, harder than I think I had cried in the entire 2 years since Eli's father walked out. Except this time, the tears didn't feel like drowning. They felt like finally being allowed to come up for air. I called Mrs. Denton first, my voice so shaky she thought something terrible had happened, until I got the words out clearly enough for her to understand. She screamed so loud into the phone that Eli started laughing in the background, delighted by the noise, completely unaware that his mother's entire world had just tilted back upright. I started at Holloway Industries the following Monday, operations coordinator, reporting directly to Daniel, exactly as promised. My first week was a blur of learning names, learning systems, learning how to walk into rooms full of executives without flinching at the memory of the last room I'd walked into in that building. Daniel checked in constantly, not hovering, but present. always making sure I had what I needed, always the first to notice when I was pushing myself too hard and gently redirecting me toward rest instead. "You don't have to prove anything to me," he told me during my second week, catching me still at my desk well past 6 in the evening. "Go home. Be with your son. I want to earn this," I said. "I don't want anyone thinking I got this position because of what happened on the highway." "Maya." He leaned against the doorframe of my office, arms crossed. That same steady look he'd given me in the conference room the day everything changed. "You've already earned it 10 times over in 2 weeks. I'm not worried about anyone questioning your work ethic. I'm worried about you collapsing from exhaustion before your daughter is even born." I hadn't told him her gender yet. I hadn't told anyone. But somehow, standing there in my office doorway, with genuine concern written across his face, it slipped out easily, like he'd already earned the right to know. "It's a girl," I said. Something shifted in his expression, softened even further, and he smiled in a way I hadn't seen from him before. Not the polished, composed smile he wore in board meetings, but something quieter, more private. "A girl," he repeated. "That's wonderful, Maya." Over the following weeks, our working relationship settled into something comfortable, productive, built on the same instinctive trust that had formed between us on the side of that highway. He valued my input in meetings the way he'd valued my hands on that jack, without hesitation, without needing to be convinced I knew what I was doing. I found myself staying a little later some evenings, not because the work demanded it, but because our conversations after everyone else had gone home had become something I looked forward to more than I wanted to admit. He asked about Eli constantly, remembered small details I mentioned only once, followed up on the heart specialist's appointments with a genuine investment that had nothing to do with obligation. When Eli's procedure was finally scheduled, a minor, low-risk correction the specialist assured me would resolve the murmur completely, Daniel cleared his entire afternoon to sit in the waiting room with me, even though I told him repeatedly he didn't need to. "I know I don't need to," he said, sitting beside me in a plastic waiting room chair that looked absurdly small for a man in a $3,000 suit. "I want to." Somewhere between that afternoon and the following month, I stopped pretending to myself that what I felt for him was simple gratitude. It was late October, my pregnancy stretching into its final weeks, when he found me in the break room one evening, both of us the last 2 people left on the floor again. "Can I ask you something?" he said, leaning against the counter while I waited for the kettle to finish heating water for tea. "And you can absolutely tell me it's inappropriate and none of my business." That's an ominous way to start a question. "Eli's father," he said carefully. "Is he still in the picture at all?" "No," I said. "He left when I was 4 months pregnant with Eli. Said he wasn't ready. I haven't heard from him since, and honestly, I stopped hoping I would a long time ago." Daniel nodded slowly, something working behind his eyes. "So you've been doing all of this completely alone? The pregnancy, Eli, the eviction, all of it?" "Not entirely alone," I said. "Mrs. Denton helps when she can. And now you." "I don't just want to be someone who helps, Maya." He straightened, and I watched him choose his next words carefully, like he'd been rehearsing them for longer than just this moment. "These past few months, working with you, watching you handle everything life has thrown at you with more strength than anyone I've ever met, I haven't just come to respect you. I've fallen for you, completely. And I understand if that's not something you have room for right now, with everything on your plate, but I couldn't keep pretending it wasn't true." The kettle clicked off behind me, forgotten. I stood there in that quiet break room, my hand instinctively drifting to my belly the way it always did, in moments that mattered, and I let myself really look at him. This man who had changed the entire trajectory of my life, not because he owed me anything, but because somewhere along the way, he'd started to genuinely care. "I wasn't looking for this," I admitted. "I wasn't looking for any of this. I was just trying to survive the day. I know. But I feel it too," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I have for weeks. I just didn't think it was fair to say anything, given everything you've already done for me. I didn't want you to think I never thought that," he said quickly, closing the distance between us. Not for 1 second. He reached up and gently brushed a strand of hair back from my face, the same careful, deliberate gentleness he brought to everything, and I felt something settle inside me that had been unsettled for years. Some deep, exhausted part of me finally allowed to rest. Our relationship unfolded slowly after that. Carefully, both of us mindful of my daughter's approaching due date, both of us determined not to rush into something neither of us wanted to get wrong. He was there in the delivery room 3 weeks later when my daughter, Sophie, entered the world screaming and furious and perfect, and he held her before almost anyone else did, looking down at her with an expression of such complete tenderness that I knew, without a single doubt, that whatever this was between us, it was real. He proposed the following spring, on the same stretch of highway where we'd first met, having arranged for the shoulder to be cordoned off just long enough for him to kneel down beside the exact spot where I'd once knelt beside him with a tire iron in my hands. "You changed my tire, and you changed my life," he said, ring box open, Eli standing beside him holding Sophie's tiny hand in his. "Let me spend the rest of mine making sure you never have to carry anything alone again." I said yes before he even finished the sentence. We built a life together after that, a real one, steady and secure, in ways I had once been afraid to even imagine. Eli grew stronger every year, his heart murmured nothing but an old memory by the time he started kindergarten. Sophie grew up knowing the story of how her parents met, how her mother stopped for a stranded stranger on the side of a highway despite having every reason in the world to keep driving, and how that single choice, made in 11 desperate seconds, ended up saving all of us. I think about that morning often, the version of me who sat frozen at the wheel deciding whether to stop, terrified and exhausted and certain that stopping would cost her everything. I wish I could tell her what I know now, that the sacrifice wouldn't be the end of her story. It would be the beginning of it.